listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in and glad to have you with me. Even though it is a edition of LSU Daily that's becoming a little all too familiar, LSU loses their third consecutive game, this time on the road at Florida, 27-16. And while it's a third straight loss, this one felt a little different than the previous two. We will dive into it and also kind of look at the big picture once again, because what we've talked about here really for the whole year, going all the way back to week number 1 after they lost to USC, was avoiding regression in the record. And you have no longer done that. LSU at their fourth loss, their ceiling right now is 8-4 in the regular season, and that's a new low mark for Brian Kelly at LSU. And quite honestly, what you've seen the last 3 weeks is a new low mark for Brian Kelly at LSU. Frustration is beginning to boil over from the coaching staff, from the players. It is a really, really tough look around the LSU program right now, and one that even the most pessimistic LSU fan couldn't see coming, and one that even the most optimistic fan definitely didn't see coming. But it's where they are. So let's sit down and let's have a chat, shall we? Let's talk about it all. Be sure to subscribe, like, share. All those things are greatly appreciated. Follow me on social media, at Musso Matthew on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And it's greatly appreciated. All right. So LSU loses to Florida 27-16. It is a third straight loss. It is another inexcusable loss. LSU, when you look at this game, like first and foremost, why this is different than the other two. Because I kind of led the show saying that this has felt different than the other two. First and foremost, why that is because you won the game in every friggin' category except the one that matters, and that's score. You out first downed Florida. You outgained Florida. You out third downed Florida. You only had 3 penalties to their 7. Time of possession, you doubled them up. LSU held the ball for 41 minutes and 43 seconds in this game to Florida's 18 minutes, 17 seconds, and you freaking lost. Another reason this is different. The last 2 losses, you've been able to really put blame on both sides. I thought the LSU defense on Saturday played one hell of a football game, really right up until the end, when they were once again not necessarily set up for success. Florida's go-ahead touchdown to make it 20-13, they started in LSU territory on the 45-yard line. So you set them up with a short field. But time and time again, kind of like you saw, the one that comes to mind most is the Ole Miss game, where your offense was just slow to get started and couldn't find rhythm, and really a lot of what we've seen from them all year long. Your defense stepped up, made stops, got you the ball back, kept you in the game, even to one point getting you a lead early in the second half, and you frickin' lost anyway still. We had talked about it, y'all. DJ Lagway wasn't going to be able to run the ball. The guy was on one leg. He was on one leg with that hamstring. He didn't have one rushing attempt. It set up very well for LSU's defense. And I thought they responded really well for the majority of that game until the very end when they gave up the 2 touchdown drives to ice the game for Florida. And again, one of them started on the LSU 45. As much of a struggle as it has been for LSU's defense stopping running quarterbacks, and it has been, they've also been set up with some really crappy field position the last 3 weeks as well. And that was just the latest example. The reason for this loss mainly focuses on the LSU offense, in my opinion. And even there, y'all, even there were good things. LSU ran 92 plays in this football game to Florida's 43, and you still freaking lost. But you heard Brian Kelly all week talk about wanting more balance in the offense. Well, buddy, you got that. LSU attempted 48 passes. They ran it 44 times. Like, there's your balance. The problem is you have no rhythm on offense, and you haven't all season. It's been a struggle for that unit from a coaching perspective, from a playing perspective, to get into a rhythm. And there's a lot of reasons why. Whether it's not having a consistent running game, whether it's not having the threat down the field to enlist fear in the opponent that you can take the top off of a defense. And look, LSU tried. They tried Saturday night with Chris Hilton, but you couldn't, and some of them were there, but you couldn't connect on any of them. Whether it was an overthrow, whether it was Hilton again mistiming his jump, and that's subsequently which led Brian Kelly to just rip him on the sideline. There's no big play explosive threat on the LSU offense right now. And there hasn't been all season. You've had outliers. You've had some big plays to Aaron Anderson, but it hasn't really been consistent. You've had some big plays with Caden Durham, but they haven't really been consistent enough. You've had a big issue with pre-snap penalties the last month that just set you back behind the chains. And then, oh, by the way, Garrett Nessmeyer was sacked 7 friggin' times in that football game. And there's 2 ways to look at that. And let's look at them both. Number one, we've said all year, if you get to Nuss, tip of the hat. LSU had allowed 6 sacks coming into that game. Florida got 7. Their linebackers were awesome, especially Shamar James. He was great. They really made up for the loss of Howard there in the middle, who was their highest graded tackler. They were awesome. We had talked so much about Coach Armstrong's aggressive approach on defense, and buddy, did you see that on Saturday night? They did what no other team has been able to do this year and really just own LSU in the pass rush. Now, the other side of the coin that we also want to explore there is, in the last 3 games, starting with the second half against A&M, LSU's pass protection has not been as good as it was early in the season. It hasn't. Now, I think a lot of the times you've seen it really break down late, and for what it's worth, it broke down later in this game as well. Like, in the second half is where the majority of those sacks came from. But you have seen Nuss under more pressure starting in that second half against Texas A&M. And it is very fair to look at this offensive line. And it wasn't all in the offensive line. You had some protection in the running from the running back room as well that led to sacks on Nussmeier too. You've got 2 young players now in your interior since the injury to Garrett Dellinger, and that matters a whole lot now too, because Garrett Dellinger had graded out as your best offensive lineman to this point, and hopefully he's back against Vanderbilt. But even with all of that, with the struggles you had from running backs in pass pro, with the young guys in the interior, with all of that, it is fair to look at this season from the offensive line that was so heralded coming in, that's going to have a first-round pick in Will Campbell, that had 4 returning starters, and be disappointed in the performance that you've seen as a whole this season. Because it did not live up to the expectation I think that anybody had, even them in the building. And they might not tell you that right now, but one day I think you will hear that. It just hasn't been a complete unit. And now you've seen them start to struggle in the area they were the best at. I'm not saying there's going to be another team this season that goes out and gets 7 sacks against LSU, because I don't think that there will be. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not telling you LSU's offensive line is horrible at pass protection. They aren't. That's why we looked at both sides. You tip your hat to Florida. They did what nobody else could do. But the reason I think you are seeing this team struggle a little bit more in protecting the quarterback is the offense has just been found out. They have no rhythm. No one fears explosiveness from this LSU offense on a consistent basis, and it changes the way teams are guarding them. They're being put behind the chains a little bit more, and you're having more obvious passing situations. You're able to pin your ears back. You have no fear that anyone's going to get behind you from on a defensive secondary perspective. You can sit back there, and just play and free up more rushers, things of that nature. Everything works in tandem in football, right? We know that. To me, they've been completely found out, and it started in that second half against A&M. Mike Elko exposed things about LSU's offense. Alabama's been able to do it, and so has Florida. LSU moved the ball well in between the 30s. Fact is, you scored one touchdown. You had to kick field goals the rest of the night. And each time you got down there, you got in your own way. That's the other thing that just completely took rhythm away from LSU. They continued to just get in their own way time and time again when they had drives going. LSU's third drive of the game, for example, it's the one they missed the 51-yard field goal. You moved down the field pretty well. You did great to keep yourself in short third down and manageable. You converted 3 of them all the way down. You get there to the Florida 32, kind of going in with a chance to tie the football game up with a touchdown, and that's when you have a false start by Will Campbell, and it backs you up. After that, a 2-yard loss from Caden Durham, and you go from 2nd and 8 at the Florida 32 to 3rd and 15 at the Florida 39, and then ultimately you have to try a 51-yard field goal, and you miss. You were moving, and you put yourself behind the chains. A couple drives later, so after you score the touchdown, Florida's coming off the field goal. It's 10-7. And LSU starts to go on another drive. This time, you get all the way down to the Florida 25-yard line. So you're right on the precipice of getting into the red zone. Garrett Nussmeier is sacked by Shamar James. You go from 2nd and 10 at the Florida 25 to 3rd and 18 at the Florida 33. And then that obviously results in the field goal. Then there's the fumble, where Nuss is sacked, fumbles, Emory Jones recovers it, but tries to make a play, and he subsequently fumbles, and Florida gets the football. Now, you credit LSU's defense. They came up with the stop, but that was ultimately a chance for you to take control of the football game. You were up 13-10. Florida had tied it at 13, and you had just forced the punt. You had just gotten the ball back with a chance to go take control of the game, and you fumble it away. Your defense still forces you the punt. You have another chance right there to take control of the game, but you don't. You go 3 and out. You end up having to punt from your own 5, and that's when you really give Florida the short field. And LSU's defense just they couldn't hold anymore. That was the story of the game. You couldn't ever get out of your way on offense. You did things that take yourself out of rhythm when you were finally starting to establish. LSU got into the Florida red zone one time. And then they went backwards. It was midway through the third quarter. You had got it down to the Florida 14-yard line for a 1st down and 10. You have the complete pass to Daniels on 3rd and 9, but that's when you had the pass interference on Kyron Lacey, and that backed you up out of the red zone, made it 3rd down and 24, and again, you ended up having to settle for a field goal. They could not stay in rhythm. A lot of it was Florida's defense taking you out of it, but man, I think more of it was you taking yourself out of it. And that's disappointing. That's how you lose a game in which you out first down the team, you more than double them up in plays run, you double them up in time of possession, you out first down them, you out third down them, you outgain them, you do everything you need to, and you still lose. It's because you can't get out of your own way. And that speaks to me to confidence in both the coaching staff and the players right now. It's shaken. It's wavered. You were just kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop. No pun intended with the Florida game. But you You were just waiting for that next thing to go wrong. And when you get into that mode, more often than not, that next thing will go wrong. And in this case, it costs you finishing drives really every time. That's a brutal loss. That is an inexcusable loss. And as I said, you could see frustration boiling over in that game from the players and from the coaches. So where does LSU go from here? Well, it's fair to ask. I mean, is this kind of rock bottom? Man, the 3 straight losses is the first time for LSU since 2021. That was obviously the year we saw Ed Ogeron get fired. I mean, and he coached the rest of the season knowing he wasn't coming back. When you just had a lame duck head coach, you end up losing 3 games in a row. Again, Brian Kelly's not getting fired. We know that, so I'm not going to that. I'm just using that as the comparison to kind of just show you, man, the last time LSU's program did this, this is where they were. And here's what I would say. Big picture, you're obviously not going to fix anything for the big picture with 2 games left in the regular season. You're not. Those fixes come in the offseason. You have this great recruiting class that you're going to bring in. You feel really good about, keeping just about everybody in it that you really have to have, right? You might lose a guy here or there. Attrition happens in a recruiting class, normally anyway. For example, y'all, Alabama beat LSU by 29. They had 4 players flip out of their class in the days after that. Attrition happens. Alabama still's a top 5 class, all of that, just using that as an example. So don't freak out if and when there is attrition in the class and be like, oh, now they can't even hold the group together. No, for the main part, they're going to hold the group together. That will help. You have to attack in the transfer portal this offseason, and you have to hit. You have to hit. Because we've talked so much about personnel on the LSU defense. You struggle with personnel on the LSU offense as well. You don't have that true number 1 wide receiver this year. Outside of Caden Durham, you don't really have a running back. That's not meant to be a shot at Josh Williams. Caden Durham is just your best running back, and then you have Williams, and that's kind of it for your depth. That losing Emory hurt. Having Trey Holly embroiled in this legal situation, it hurts you at there. So you have a personnel issue on offense as well that you need to address. And again, that will be done in the recruiting class, but also in the portal, and you have to hit. 2 years in a row, you have missed. You have missed in the transfer portal for the large part of this. It's not to say you haven't had some bright spots. You have, but LSU, man, they're not that much different personnel-wise than they were last year, and they were able to succeed better last season after the loss to Alabama. That team, which had a historically bad defense, didn't drop 3 games in a row. And that's also where I think you look at this and you see the confidence issue for LSU as well. And that's something you can work on now in the regular season. There were some positives from that game against Florida. It didn't feel like it, but there were some. We went through some of them. You had more balance. You just couldn't get the rhythm on offense. Your defense played really well for the majority of that game. The issue there, though, is now you have the challenge of a Diego Pavia coming in again with Vanderbilt. That is actually what's been giving you the problems. But still, what can you take from some of the positives that you did and build on that? Can you finally erase these self-inflicted wounds that you're having on offense? You have to be able to stop the bleeding. You've already regressed in the record, and for me, that's inexcusable. Because I've seen you do more with less so far from a personnel standpoint, and this year you couldn't do it. And I don't want to say you've lost the team, because I don't really think Brian Kelly has lost the team. But you've lost something in there right now. And for me, I think it's confidence. So the best thing you can hope for is that you win your final 2 games, you go 8-4. That's going to be dissatisfying enough. You go to some bowl game that nobody cares about, and who really cares about the results and exhibition at this point? I don't care. And then you work on fixing this thing long term, because now there is going to be no more excuse for that. You have the players to lay the next championship foundation coming in the 25 class, and you're setting up and pacing great for the 26 class as well. After that, there is no excuse. After that, there is no defending. After that, it is either going to be you take the next step or you know what comes after it. But in the immediacy, man, you have to go beat Vanderbilt. And I don't know that you do. I don't know that you do. We'll have a lot of time to break that down, but I think if this team could just get a win, have something go their way to where you're not feeling like, man, the next shoe is just about to drop. Get a win, get some confidence back, because, y'all, it's been a month. It has been a month since LSU has won a football game. Your last win came on October the 19th against Arkansas. 1 month since you've won. That takes a toll. You're going to find out who wants to get this thing back on the right track. Everybody plays for different reasons at this point in the season, but guys are still going to play hard. Can they play together and finish this season with 2 wins? For me, that's far from a certainty. That's far from a certainty. But we'll see. Really disappointing. Bitterly disappointing. You know, no one was really happy with 9-3 in Kelly's first 2 seasons, but it felt different, right? And we had that conversation. First year you go 9-3, you make the SEC championship. That's huge. Man, it felt like you were off and running, and for him to do that, to do something like that after LSU went 6-6, you had the portal exodus, you had all that, but the thing is, they hit in the portal that year, and you could see how fast it could turn around. So again, keep that in mind going forward. And you've seen plenty of examples around college football with that when we're talking about the personnel. It can turn around quick. But that year was 9-3, but man, it felt different. And you could have been 10-2. You early should have been 10-2. You lost to a 4-win A&M team. But it's that year still felt different. You expected to jump up. LSU, you had a, top 5 team coming into the season or whatnot. You lose the opener to Florida State. You have that historically bad defense, but man, you had a great talent in Jaden Daniels. He wins a Heisman Trophy, and even with that historically bad defense, you were able to get to 9-3 again. And while it didn't feel great, it didn't feel horrible. It was kind of a mixed feeling, right? Where it was like, man, if you had a defense, you're probably in the playoff and competing for a national championship, so that part stinks. They cost you, and you went 9-3. But it was also, man, with that defense, you went 9-3 behind a generational player at quarterback, and you got to see another Heisman Trophy season. Mixed feelings there. There ain't no mixed feelings about this year. Because you've been better on defense. You've been better. You are not good when it comes to stopping running quarterbacks, but you've been better as a whole, because hard to be worse. But offensively, it is a lot harder to replace everything that they lost than we gave credit for. Just was. And I mean everything. From Daniels to Neighbors to Thomas to Mike Denbrock. That's a lot of change. And we all hand-waved it away because it's LSU, and you had Nussmeier waiting in the wings, and receivers grow on trees here in Louisiana. You can throw a rock and hit an insane athlete and get him the ball and he'll go, right? That's what we are. And what we've seen happen, you don't have quite the personnel that we thought you would offensively. So, while you could see a regression on the field, you were hopeful that they could still get more out of the team and keep that record in the same place. You didn't. And now this season's always just going to have a really, really sour taste in the mouth, especially because it's year 3 under Brian Kelly, and that's supposed to be when his teams take the best jump. It didn't happen this time. But they'll try to go win the last 2 games, and you'll turn your attention to year 4, where improvement is going to be more than expected. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. Y'all subscribe, like, share. Follow me on social media. Greatly appreciated. Thanks for being here. Be here next time for more on LSU Daily.